Today's topic is equine photography, and we have just my favorite guest ever to speak on this topic. Britt Gillis is here, and Britt is a longtime Ride IQ member, and is just we were just talking about how Ride IQ and Britt cross paths in so many different ways. So it's only fitting that Britt is now our guest to teach us about some equine photography. And whenever I get to connect with Britt, it is a highlight of my day and just is energizing for me. So I was very excited about tonight. And Britt, thank you for taking the time to do this with us and check one more Ride IQ to do off of your list.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here and talk about something that I've been doing for a long time that I'm also passionate about. So, yeah, appreciate it.
So tell us a little bit about that. You said you've been doing it for a long time. I know you're a lifelong equestrian. So maybe talk to us about your background in riding and how you got into photography and kind of where you sit now with equine photography and the rest of everything else you have going on in your life.
Yeah, sure. So I literally came out of the womb, I think, with jodhpurs on. I grew up on a breeding farm. I was sat on a horse at 18 months old. And the photography aspect of things started in the same context. So, as a kid, I had to help my mom take photos of sales mares or foals for selling. We were breeding Tricaners, Connemara's, and Belgian warm bloods. We had a very different kind of studs on the farm. So I learned a lot about patience and conformation photos. And then fast forward all the way into college, I have continued writing the whole time. And I went to NC State's design school, and I have a concentration in photography where I learned how to make photos in the darkroom and all of that fun stuff, and have taken that into the equestrian aspect of portraiture, which I've been doing as having my own LLC since 2016. So been really focused on that, and it's just been wonderful.
And where does equine photography fall into your like are you doing equine photography full time and how does that kind of break up between events and portraits, or are you doing this in addition to other work?
Yeah, so actually, this is my side hustle. This is what helps me support the horse habit. And in my full time job, I actually manage a team of graphic designers, which is why my business name is Britt Gillis Design. I also do some design work. But yeah, the photography is just my creative outlet as well as being whatever pays, for the shows and all of that. But it's all portraiture at this stage. I'll shoot the occasional clinic, but I like to leave the show photography to those pros.
Yeah, okay, I love it. And you and I were talking about how to best tackle this topic to help people and give them some tips that they can use. And we decided that there's kind of two categories of people listening. One who is I mean, it's most of us. We take a gajillion photos of our horse. You open your camera roll, and if you're like me, all of the photos are pretty bad, but it doesn't stop me. So that person, how can we help them? Probably shooting on a phone and just make some of those photos better and give them some things to think about and some tools to use. So that's one bucket, kind of the horse lover amateur, all of us. And then the second bucket is the person who really wants to up level their photography. So they're probably wanting to invest in a camera
Mhm.
and maybe do this as a side hustle themselves, or um or just, get better, or take it to a whole career. So there's those are the two kind of categories we're going to talk about today, and I'm hoping we can start with that amateur. We'll call them just the amateur photographer, probably amateur rider, the all of us person. Um so tell me, when someone's taking photos on their phone, what should they consider about lighting and environment and time of day to get a great shot?
Yeah, so this is the perfect question to get us started with because really photography is all about lighting. Nerd alert here. Photography actually means like light writing. So lighting being everything, you really want to ideally photograph in what we call the golden hour, which is the first couple hours after sunrise and the last couple hours before sunset. But the key is to really avoid the very harsh light that comes when the sun is directly above you. That's more for portraits than it is like human portraits, probably, than horses. Although horses do have, interesting areas of their face that will cause shadows. But what we're really trying to avoid with the harsh light is the light causing shadows on the face. So the eyebrows causing shadows into the light sockets, or the nose causing a shadow onto the mouth. Having kind of a more gentle light is definitely going to produce a much more flattering result.
Okay, that's interesting. And if you're, I mean, that's for people to just have in their back pocket, but also makes me think like if you're scheduling time with a photographer, if the photographer doesn't suggest that time, maybe you can suggest that
Yes,
time a couple hours. You said a couple hours before sunset or after sunrise.
correct. Yep.
Okay. And talk to me about angles. This is something I could use some help on angles myself, but talk to me about angles when people are shooting horses. Um, Either, just still or on the move. What should they be thinking about in terms of where they're pointing their camera and maybe where the horse is in the frame?
Yeah, so a lot of the various like poses can be discipline specific. I know in the Western world, they definitely want a much lower frame to be seen versus, a Grand Prix dressage rider is going to want them really elevated in the front end. Um, for jumpers, you want, the snappy knees. But in general, as a rule, I like to either for conformation or for action photos, and this particularly um, relates to the trot. I like for the forearm that is closest to the camera to be in front. So I'm going to be, see, I told you I was going to be awkward. So foreleg and the other foreleg, but the one that's furthest from the camera, I'd prefer to be behind instead of this way. So, like I said, for the trot, that becomes especially important. It's not that it's wrong otherwise, it's just that it's more aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Um, and I mean, I guess when you're playing with your like with your horse's angles, I is that something that you just recommend people kind of experiment with and take a lot of photos and see what's working best? But I'm thinking like, do I go I know a lot of humans like hold the camera high so you're not coming in from like the
Mhm.
chin angle. For horses is like, do you like to similarly like kind of have a high angle, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. Great question. I would generally speaking try and shoot so that their eyes are very well framed, and so probably I'd be focusing on having the camera at their eye line. Regarding angles, I would say for shooting on like an iPhone, that wonderful portrait mode, it's great. But if you have a horse, what it is intended to do is make the background fade away. So a horse being significantly deeper if they're facing the camera than a human, their body is going to fade out really, really quickly. So portrait mode is going to be really most helpful for when you have a horse that's completely sideways to the camera, so that the plane of depth that they're on is consistent, and then the background behind them can be blurred out. So that would be one like trip for, for taking an iPhone and trying to produce like a good portrait. You could use the portrait mode and use it most effectively in that way with that angle.
Yes, okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's super helpful, and that segues nicely into my next question, which is about iPhone tricks for better photos. So, what features should people be using that they probably aren't, or vice versa, which you just touched on a little bit? Is there anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, for portrait mode is a really wonderful tool. I like doing that, or just making sure that you have the face in focus. Especially now that AI is trying to be a useful tool in so many arenas, and it's working for us in face recognition technology, but isn't going to necessarily see a horse and know to focus on that. So just making sure that you're tapping on the horse so that the iPhone's focusing on your subject. That's probably that between that and portrait mode, I would say those are the 2 things that would make for the nicest iPhone photo.
Do you have a sense of or any familiarity with how Android does with their photos. I don't either. And I am so sorry to our Android users. We love you guys too. And I
I'm
know
so
that you guys
sorry.
have good cameras on your phones. But we'll probably be using, I think Android users probably know kind of the conversion of what we're
Yeah,
talking about. But we'll stick to iPhone terminology.
yeah,
Um,
sorry.
Talk to me about presets. This is a very genuine question because when I look at some feeds like on social media that are really beautiful, they're consistent
Mhm.
aesthetically. And it's not that they're all the same. Like some of them are light and airy, and some of them are dark and moody. And I don't have the slightest idea how people, one, determine their own aesthetic, and then two, edit their photos in a way that has this cohesion. So tell me what a preset is, please, because I don't know. And are there any editing apps that people are using to apply these? What's your familiarity with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I use presets in my own work. It just helps to speed up the editing process because it's applying like a frequently used set of tweaks, if you will, to a photo. So it gives you a really fast way to get a quick like baseline, and then you can adjust to that specific image from there. But it just helps to get a much more consistent look. So mine my aesthetic, I used to be much more light and airy, but now I'm kind of which is very film based. I like to have a little bit of a hint of film, but I'm more of a true to life and, vibrant. Sorry, I'm trying to avoid my cat from walking in front of the screen.
Oh, your cat's
Um,
welcome. Don't worry.
um, so yeah, the presets are super helpful for at least getting me to like, for instance, I'm gonna get really technical here. Um, Film tends to have much cooler greens. So when I apply my first preset, it'll automatically take my greens and take them just slightly towards the blue side of the spectrum instead of towards the yellow side. Um, and then I can go in and tweak exactly how I want it. But that's, for instance, a preset that I use. There are a lot of really, I mean, there's so many presets out there, but if I had to recommend some really good ones that you can use for mobile, Mastin Labs, that's Mastin. Mastin has some great ones. Lou and Marks, like the names, they have some really great ones. And then if you really want to spend a lot of money to get kind of a high end look on your iPhone photos or mobile photos. KJ mobile presets is another one. Um, and those tend to be a little bit more in kind of that vibe that I like. But for
Mhm.
instance, Lewin Marks has a bunch of options for the folks who like a slightly different kind of look.
Okay, so with those presets, do you like I I hate that I don't know what I don't know, but do you go to like Lewin Mark's website, buy specific presets, and then if you do you use a certain app to like utilize those
Yes.
presets on your
Yes.
photos?
Oh, I left out that big part. So, yeah, so there are various apps that you can use them with. The one that I am most familiar with is Adobe Lightroom, which is the desktop version is what I edit with, professionally, but they also have a free app. So, Adobe Lightroom, you can apply a preset and it can be just as simple as clicking, tapping a button.
Yeah, I love
Um,
it.
or you can get into the controls and you can, do a lot of really fun stuff. So, yeah, you would purchase the, files from the website, download them to your phone, and, they would come with installation instructions. They can't be that difficult to
Yeah,
use.
that I bet I could do.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
And I like that because that is a way to kind of get a more cohesive aesthetic if that's what you're going for
Exactly.
on social media, for example, or just in your own personal camera roll.
Yeah.
Um, that sounds fun. Those are great suggestions. Let's see what we have next. Assessing and improving your own work. So that's I have this as like our next topic of discussion. And this one I have always wondered how people hone the skill of like having a great eye I have friends, like, I'll take one photo and then they'll be like, "Here, let me do it." And they take the same seems like the same photo to me, and their photo looks great and mine looks like crap, especially comparatively. So, how do you hone the skill of having an eye? And it's an okay answer is just like some people are artistic and some people are not. Maybe it's more innate, but is there like do you have any suggestions for honing that skill?
Yeah,
Is it a
well,
skill to hone?
it definitely can be a skill. I think one is just, you can see what, people are finding popular on social media if you wanna go that route and try and emulate it. Um, but for me, horses are so beautiful that, I mean, we kind of know the obvious things, like, having ears forward is really important. If a horse is looking particularly mulish, probably not the photo that we want to print out for our Christmas card. So ears for horses and the eyes are really, the most critical. But, when it comes to equestrian portraiture, it's the people. We're the most critical of the people, and I think the viewer, as a viewer, we're really, quick to tap into whether someone is clearly uncomfortable, um, or very, very posed. So those are the things that I think can make or break a photo if something looks like just really stiff and artificial. Um, so at least if you're ever having a photo of you taken, and you're feeling kind of stiff in front of the camera, just rocking from side to side, honestly, or just shifting your weight backwards and forwards, can make a huge difference in how realistic and relaxed and genuine an image can come across. So that's one thing that I look for when I'm going through photos. Does someone look like are hating their experience being in front of a
Yeah.
camera? Ideally not. The photos that where they look like they're having a good time end up being the better photos.
Okay, that's great. So, I love the shifting of the weight tip back and forth or side to side. Is there anything else you say to your clients when they're in front of the camera, um, to help them feel a little bit more comfortable or look more natural?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the fun thing about working with horses is just knowing when you need to stop and take a break. And so there are so many options that I like to employ so that I don't lose that valuable golden hour light. Um, and I still can get photos, and the horse can have a chance to relax, and it doesn't feel like such a monumental thing that's happening. So when in those moments, I will typically let the horse graze and just pull way back. Pull way back, step really far away and just give them some space. But also, I can typically get some really pretty landscape photos. I can also have the rider lead the horse away or to me. And then it matters less what the horse is doing in regards to their expression. And I can just coach the rider, and the horse gets kind of that mental break of not having to stand and maybe get tense. So just introducing movement or allowing the horse to be a horse are definitely good ways to help ease the atmosphere.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Um, okay, tell us some common mistakes that ruin photos. What should people avoid when they're taking photos of their horse or their horse and their friend?
I think, going back to what I said earlier, lighting is just the number one thing. So probably the number one mistake that I see is people having lots of shadows on their face. And there's a couple ways you can avoid that. One is to always have the sun behind you. An easier way to even think about it is always face your shadow. Then that means that the sun's hitting the back of your face, and the front of your face is not going to have the effect of that. The other option is to, if it is really harsh light, find some really even shade, and you can pay attention to if there's like daffles on the face for the horse or human. And so if you find really even shade, you can still get some really nice photos, even if it is like that, not the ideal time of day. So just looking for the lighting and paying attention to those things can make a huge, huge difference.
Well, my whole life I've been positioning myself so the sun is toward my face. So I'm
And
learning, I guess.
squinting.
That's the exact opposite of what I should be doing. Um, so the sun comes directly to the back of your head then?
Hmm.
All
Yep.
right.
Yep,
There's
and
a
I grew
revelation.
up the same way. My dad always had us facing the sun, say, "Face the sun," and then everyone's like, "Okay,
Yeah.
I can't see anything." But no, actually, if you do the exact opposite, you'll get everyone will actually be able to open their eyes and
Mhm.
look less cringy, but also you're not gonna have since the sun will be back here, the only shadow that it's creating is gonna be on the ground in front of you and not actually on the face or any on the
Okay.
structures.
So same thing for the horse too. You want the
Same
shadows or
thing.
you want the sun coming behind them.
Yep.
All right. Well, never too old to learn something new, I guess. um, tell us the opposite. Tell us the good photo checklist that people could kind of mentally check off before pressing the shutter.
Yeah, so if you've got lighting down, then it's just a matter of, like I said, like tapping on the phone so that the phone
Mhm.
is focusing on what you want it to, ideally the horse. The other thing that I tend to pay attention to is the background. So trying to find non-distracting backgrounds, whether that's you know, you don't want the trash can in the background or whatever, cars or whatever. The beauty of shooting horses is that they're very large creatures, and oftentimes you can position them so that they can hide some of those distracting elements. I use that a lot. If there's something like a car, I can actually have the horse step up one step or two steps, and you won't ever see the car, even though it's there. So that's just another thing that I think people can definitely use and to their advantage. I mean, you've got a 1,000 pound
Totally.
animal.
Yeah.
It works out well.
Okay. That's super smart. And the last question I have that just came to mind as you were talking about, like, we kind of have a solution for obviously golden hour is ideal. We have a
Mhm,
solution for midday as well, if you have even shade or if you have to put that sun behind you. What if
mhm.
you're in the barn? Or, I mean, in an indoor is probably never going to be a great photo, but if you're indoors, what are some things you're thinking about? Are you bringing lighting in? Is that
Yeah,
the only way to get a great photo?
it is tou indoors are tough situations because there needs to be enough light, hitting the sensor of the camera for it to actually work, um, and especially if you're trying to capture action, it means that the shutter has to open and close really quickly in order to, like, stop that action, so, yeah, any way you can bring in light is gonna help. I know some shows, run with flash. It makes me so glad that I never tried to show Jack, at one of those
Yeah.
events. That would have been terrible. But yeah, any way you can bring light into it or just lower your expectations and try not to get action, try to just focus on much more like still, type of shots. I think you'll be a lot more successful and happy with the results doing that in low light environments.
Okay, and is that something that presets could maybe help with if you
They
chose
could
one
help a
that's like
little bit, but it's gonna get grainy if you try and, like, brighten up a photo that was taken in that kinda setting. It'll
okay.
get grainy quite quickly, yeah.
And my last curiosity as I was thinking about, like, we've talked about angles, we've talked about environment, a lot of these things that you can control. Another thing you can control is where the horse is in your frame. And for some reason, it got in my mind, like, I don't know, a long time ago that putting your subject center frame is kind of like tips everyone off that you are not artistic, not creative, and don't have a design eye. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but tell me what you think about in terms of where you're putting your subjects in a frame.
So, yeah, a lot of that just goes down to kind of your taste. I actually one of my favorite photos that I just took of my new horse Bruce. He's head on and centered in the frame, but he's facing the camera, which is a bit of an unusual pose for a horse. Um, so I like if the horse is facing the camera to have them dead center. Otherwise, compositionally, though, I think the rule of thirds ends up being really good. So having the horse, if you're taking something in landscape format, having them be on the third of the frame, or imagine dividing the canvas into thirds and having them occupy the third.
Okay.
Um, on the right or the left, can make for a slightly more interesting picture. Um, of course, I would say if you're taking confirmation photos, don't get creative. Everyone wants to see the horse
Yeah.
Actually, conformation photos are probably the most frustrating and patience, testing that there are. So for those, just it doesn't matter, what's behind them or whatever. Ideally, it's simple, but just having the horse completely sideways to the camera, and finding even ground and all of that jazz, that's much more important. But yeah, if you're taking fun photos and portraits, I think the rule of thirds or having something dead center, I think both of those work.
I love those tips, and I'm glad you mentioned confirmation too. I've taken a number of these like for sale ads, but I never really knew like what the perfect template is for a confirmation photo. And I know you mentioned, of course, there's variation across disciplines and what people
Mhm,
are looking for. When we think about English disciplines and maybe specifically dressage, eventing type disciplines,
mhm.
flat ground, fully to the side, center of the frame, what should the horse's legs be doing, and what is the horse's face straight ahead, so, like, you're just seeing that single eye?
Yep. Yeah, so going back to the beginning of having one foreleg, the foreleg closest to the camera in front, I feel like having just done the horse shopping thing, I like to see all 4 legs slightly separated so that I can get a sense of, you know, hey, is that leg that's furthest from me, do I see a bowed tendon? Or, I can just get a sense of how clean the legs are if I can see all 4 of them. But you also don't want to have the horse like with one back leg here and the other one in
Yeah.
outer space. So it's a very like nuanced having the horse stand a very particular way. But also, yeah, I think some common issues with that are standing the horse in tall grass and not allowing the buyer to see what their feet angles or pastern angles are, or not showing them in complete profile when you're talking about their heads because you want to see how the throat latch attaches to the head and um, just all sorts of details like that. But I think for an amateur photographer, just even ground, making sure that the bum is not closer to you than the front of the horse, because 'cause that'll make your horse look slightly downhill. If anything, if you kinda wanna tweak that, you can go the opposite, have the forehand a little bit closer to you than the hind end. But in general, just making sure that they really are, like, perfectly, parallel to your camera, and that'll produce the best results and hopefully avoid some questions from sellers that might waste your time
Yeah,
or
and have
buyers.
a friend helping, I would imagine, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, yeah. Getting the ears up, having a friend around is, a huge, huge, help. Yeah. There are some things that you can do by yourself, but it's tough to hold a camera and be doing things,
And a
with
horse
the other
and
hand. Yeah,
yeah, okay. Don't
yeah.
try that alone,
No,
friend.
no, do not recommend.
Okay, the next question I have for you is a bit of I a just fun one. I'm curious if you can give us a challenge or 2 so that we have something to go, like, bring our camera phone to our horse and have a little assignment from you, um, to start playing around with photos.
So, I have 2.
Okay, great.
So one is, I think about this blogger that, I think she's still blogging, but Poor Woman Showing. She used to do a fantastic confirmation photo, just a really casual side, portrait of her horse, but she'd do it, over the months. But I think doing it over the course of a day, 1 a day or however times you go out to the barn, especially in times of, like, going from winter to spring to see all the fuzziness creep away
Oh,
and
it's
the
so
conditioning
fun.
come back in. I think that would be a really fun challenge to see people, be able to then you could make a reel out of it or a video and just, like, the time progression. Um, I think that would be a really fun challenge for people, and then the other one, that could make a cool triptych where you have, like, 3, images in a row, is if you were to take photos of your horse's ears, just their ears in various expressions. Maybe it's 2 forward, 1 back, both ears back, but do that and take some artistic, you know, photos that you can tell what the horse is thinking, and for an equestrian, it's kind of a fun, like, aha moment. I mean, I could definitely see, like, taking those, printing them out in black and white, and having like 3 in a row. I think that'd be super fun. Be the live, laugh, love for
Yeah,
equestrian people.
totally. Oh my gosh, Britt, I for anybody who's just listening, I have the biggest smile on my face. I didn't expect challenges to be that great, but those are like anybody who does either of those is going to have the coolest outcomes. Um, we should take this conversation to the Facebook group, everybody, and talk about turning this into a more formal challenge so we can see each other's photos. So,
Please, I'd love to see
um,
it.
I'll start a thread there. It would be very, very fun to see people's. Obviously, we could see the ears ones sooner than the ones that kind of watch as the season changes, but we should definitely do both. So I'll bring that to the Facebook group.
Love it.
Thank you for those. Those are really great suggestions. My next question for you is about any tools that people should have that might help them make their photos better. And you mentioned the opportunity to buy some presets. I think that's a great one. Is there anything else that people could equip themselves with that might help?
Yeah, so if you are taking photos of your own horse, getting the ears up and getting attention is probably the biggest challenge. So I've developed some really, really fun and kind of crazy ideas over the last several years. Starting with like, I will pop an umbrella open and set it kind of where I want the horse's attention, and then I'll go back to where I need to be and be able to take the photo. And typically, they don't see an umbrella rolling around on the ground, so that'll help with ears. Tarps are another thing, and then um, actually, hold on one second. I have a new one. I am not going to torture anybody with it soon, but give me one second.
She has props, you guys. Oh my gosh. For anybody just listening, Brit just brought on the cutest stuffed animal Dalmatian puppy.
Yeah. So, I'm not going to turn well, I don't wanna turn it on necessarily, but maybe you're not gonna get the full effect if I don't. So
Oh my gosh. And it's perfect because even if you are just listening, you can probably picture what's happening. All 4 legs are moving and it's yipping.
yeah. So
What a great
I,
idea.
my plan for the really obstinate horse that doesn't wanna get its ears up, set this puppy down, and, he does a backflip eventually.
Oh my
Um
god.
Again, I would be, like, building up to this, but I have had horses where I have gone an entire hour and just had one ear flick forward. This is for those
The
guys.
secret weapon. You
Yes.
might get some action shots
Oh,
for
yeah. Oh, yes.
with
Yes.
that.
For sure.
Those are really good suggestions and kind of dual purpose. You're helping to sensitize your horse too, so that when you maybe if you're on cross country and the jump judge has an umbrella, they've seen it before.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Jack was a spooky guy, but I tell you what, he did not spook at umbrellas.
Yeah, I bet. And now if they see a backflipping Dalmatian puppy, they'll be
Yeah,
fine as
yep.
well. Um, okay, let's talk about we talked about different times of day. What about is there anything that you think about differently winter versus summer? And something that comes to mind for me is just like I live in Denver, so when it snows here, we often have a lot of sun and it is blinding to the human eye. So I'm
Mhm.
sure that there's some photography considerations for that too. What do you think differently for winter versus summer?
Yeah, for me, having a bunch of snow sounds absolutely dreamy. Yeah, I'm sure you would want to again find when the sun is a little bit lower in the sky, so it's not hitting directly up into your face and blinding you. Um, but I think winter is a very underappreciated photography time of year. There's so many colors, and the lighting is just so different in winter than summer. You get a lot of like really beautiful purples and blues in the sunsets. And yes, you have shorter days, which means you probably have a little bit less of a window to work with. But the lighting can be just as flattering and soft in a way that summer just will never have that same kind of feel. And you can wear really fun outfits that you could not in the summertime. So I do think that winter is actually a fun time to shoot if you can get the mud off the horse with the fuzzies to make it happen.
Yeah, cool. I love that. Alrighty. Sharing photos on social media. My only question that comes to mind around this is, like, if we think about Instagram, which
Mhm.
is kind of what I think about as the main photo sharing platform, obviously there are specific dimensions that you can have for your photos on Instagram. Is there anything that you do before shooting or while you're shooting, keep in mind if you know that you're trying to get photos for social media?
Yeah, I think well, I think they just changed, the way that they display photos because it used to be just the square, and I think they just
Yes.
increased the height, right? So, actually, I need to acquaint myself with the new proportions, but before it was like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm cropping this in such a way that when someone goes to my Instagram and sees my grid, that they see an actual horse and not a weird part of a horse. Um, so it was really that consideration of like, what is the thumbnail going to look like? More than anything, and it just making sure that I have the image cropped so that it actually makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, to really that was the main thing in shooting for social media. But yeah, that this is one that I need to actually catch up on what they've just changed so that I can get ahead of the game myself.
I had a meeting with the woman who helps us with social media. Her name's Veronica from Golden Fleece Marketing. She's awesome. And yesterday she was telling me about how the Instagram sizes have changed. That's the only reason that I was familiar with that. But yeah, she was saying that they are not like they're more portrait esque
Yeah.
than square now. Um, but obviously the grid is still a consideration with square photos. So
Mhm.
are you I know the answer to this, but I'll put it out there anyways. Are you ever editing photos within Instagram, or are you doing all your editing outside of Instagram and then bringing it in?
Yeah, I really edit in Lightroom on my computer, 99% of the time, but I do notice that, occasionally I want to up the vibrance for my Instagram feed. Sometimes I just feel like social media, especially when you're trying to get attention, you really want someone to stop. And I think having just that extra bit of pop that you might not want if you were printing out a photo, I think it's more appropriate for social media. So I might do the tiniest bit of tweaking in Instagram, but it's pretty minor.
Okay, cool. That's interesting. That's a great point regarding print versus what you put on your feed. My last question within this category could actually fall within either category, amateur or kind of aspiring professional. Are there some equine photographers that come to mind that you really admire or that you kind of looked to over the years?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so many talented photographers out there. I think Shelley Paulson has been around for a long time, and I've always really looked up to her. This is going to be kind of interesting because they're all different disciplines. Kirsty Marie Jones in Texas, she does some absolutely beautiful work. Gianna Terranova, also in the hunter jumper world, and then Katie Damon. Those are just a few folks that are just absolutely beyond talented, and all of which are great to learn from. I think they all have their own kind of tutorials and and workshops and that kind of thing. That if people want to follow them and learn more, they're wonderful models for people to check out.
I am really grateful for those suggestions because I think that this type of conversation is so inspiring and gets people excited to try things on their own. And it's really helpful to be able to go appreciate the work of people who have, put in the time and really honed the craft, including
Mhm.
yourself, and have people to look to and find additional kind of like visual inspiration from. So I'm gonna go right after this and follow all of those people and see what they're doing. Um, but that's great. Let's shift now into the people who might be looking to like up level their photography beyond phone photos,
Mhm.
whether it's for themselves or for a side hustle. Tell me what someone should think about before turning photography into a business. So maybe what you would tell yourself before embarking on this, or if I came to you today and said like, I think this would be a really good idea for me to get into this as like to support a horse habit or whatever it is, what's some kind of like words that you would tell somebody before getting into that?
Yeah, I think, I would say narrow your focus from the get-go. I think it's so easy to be like, "Well, I love horses, so I'll shoot horses in any kind of setting," and and I think that, that becomes very quickly overwhelming and also difficult to sustain as a business. So making the decision of whether you want to focus your efforts in show photography and maybe in the hunter jumper world or portraiture, I think getting a sense of which track you want to go down and deciding it doesn't have to you can always broaden your horizons in terms of disciplines, but I think starting with like one niche and then making connections there and really building up a portfolio that a very small group of people can relate to is going to be the most successful way to start with your own photography business instead of just spray and pray and just reach out to the entire horse world and just say, hey, if you have a creature with that whinnies and has four legs, like I'd
Yeah.
like to shoot it. I think that's probably one of the frustrations that I see young photographers have is that they're trying to do too many things.
Mhm. That's a really great piece of advice, and I think it's applicable to just about any business really, and it seems counterintuitive sometimes because if your target market is everyone, that seems like a good thing, but
Yeah,
really it's great to be, like, an obvious choice for a specific subset, like,
yeah,
you're the pro in this area.
yeah.
Um, I think that that's really good advice and probably will help people avoid some of those frustrations that you've seen people endure. Um, so let's talk about the best way to begin. You mentioned that you took photography classes in school.
Mhm.
Is your suggestion that kind of the first step would be take a course or invest in a camera, or what would be the proper step one for this?
Yeah, so, I even though I learned the kind of the, fundamentals of photography in school, I'm mostly self-taught or by self-taught these days, I think that means I went on the internet and and I did a lot of,
Totally. There's so
Googling.
much out there.
Yeah, there's so many, tutorials out there. I would say, probably before investing in a camera, and equipment to rent it first, there's a company called lensrentals.com. I even do this for when I'm wanting to explore a new lens. I want to rent it and see if it's like something that's gonna work for me. So rent, the equipment, there's different it sounds silly, but the Nikon versus Canon versus Sony, I think they're all amazing pieces of equipment, but sometimes the menus on one system versus another might be more or less intuitive to you. So, for instance, Nikon just that clicked with my brain. So I'm a Nikon person. So renting before you buy is definitely I would advise. And then, like I mentioned, all the photographers before that have tutorials and workshops and whatnot, they're fabulous places to start and to get that kind of mentorship from someone who's done it. Um, that's a great way to really learn with that hands-on experience. And then just honestly going and shooting your barn mates. I mean, I've done so many things where I'm like, hey, so and so, I have a new lighting technique, a new posing technique that I really want to try out. Would you like to dress up and take some photos? The answer is pretty much always yes.
Always yes. Like, right now? Sure.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's what I would really recommend if someone is truly like at ground zero and wanting to build up and want to explore this pathway, I would definitely go about it in that fashion.
That makes a lot of sense. That's great that you can rent a camera. Um, I didn't know about that service, but there's such big investments that that's an awesome opportunity.
Mhm.
Um, and it's good to know and reassuring that self-taught is an option. But like you said, kind of in this day and age, if you're if you'll take the effort to find those resources, they're out there for you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that's very cool. What do you think about in terms of attracting clients? Do you think it's really important for somebody to have like a website with their portfolio there, or can we rely on social media these days or word of mouth? What I'm sure that different people lean into different things, but
Yeah.
what would your advice be on that topic?
Um, yeah, I'm lucky that I have a bunch of repeat clients that word of mouth has really worked for me especially the last few years. But I don't know how you could really do it without a basic website and a social media presence. I think it just being a visual, product, I think people expect to see it, and if you can't show it, then,
Yeah,
it's
trust me,
hard
I'm
for
good.
people. Yeah, it's hard for people to put their trust in you, so, yeah, and, I would say to people who are trying to build up their portfolio, um, I see a lot of folks offering free shoots, in some Facebook groups, and actually, if it were me, I have done free shoots before. I think I've been more successful with the shooting, in groups that I know, whether it's other boarders at the barn, maybe in your lesson program or things like that, where you have an easier connection already with the person in front of your camera, and so you can work on providing guidance, and getting a feel for the equipment instead of actually a lot of pressure that goes along with those free shoots. So I think, yes, you need that portfolio, but don't go out into the world and do as many free shoots and burn yourself out and feel the pressure. I think start with the people in the community that you're already invested in and start there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Like you can kind of experience yourself being good at it when you have a friend in front of the camera and you're
Mhm.
not feeling, uptight as well and nervous. Um, I like that suggestion a lot. Do you think would it be appropriate for somebody to, like, offer to be an apprentice for a local equine photographer if there is somebody local to them and kind of just shadow that person? Or would that be a weird thing to do because they're kind of training up their competition?
Um, no, not weird at all, I think. And I subscribe to the idea that, there's plenty to go around, there's other equine photographers right in my area. And, I'll be the first to say if I'm not available, maybe I have a competition. They're in the hunter jumper world. I'm like, hey, I know they have a similar style to me, go to them. I think there's no sense in trying to view people as competition. So I know that I've had people ask me if they could apprentice with me. It hasn't worked out just for various reasons, but absolutely, I think that'd be a fantastic way to kind of see how someone goes about it, and specifically, how do you handle those frustrating moments when either the horse or the human gets a little bit over it in front of the camera, and just how to give direction. I think, yeah, seeing that as an apprentice would be a fantastic way to go, and not weird at all.
Yeah, okay, cool. It's so interesting to hear those things that you have experienced as, like, obviously parts of the job, but parts of the job that are equally as challenging potentially as the getting the great photo is like giving the direction, making sure the
Mhm.
horse is cooperating. When you think about becoming a photographer, you kind of think about, like, how to work the camera, how to do the editing, but there's these other things that you learned are part of it once you've done it yourself. Um, Tell me, are there any misconceptions about being an equine photographer that have kind of become apparent to you?
Yeah, and that's, you know, being an equine photographer is more about connecting with the people and than it is about connecting with the horses. I think more than anything, I've just come to learn that, being able to give direction, and fortunately, I'm kind of type A, so I can do I this comes okay to me, but,
Yeah.
being able to, say, "Okay, here's what we're gonna do next," and have a plan and keep everything flowing, but you need to be able to, whether or not it's just the horse or a horse and human in front of your camera, you still need to have a plan and give direction, and know exactly what you're gonna do and what your aim is, and be able to diffuse situations. So, I think the biggest misconception is that you're an equine photographer, you're just gonna be working with horses. you're going to be working with the people who are either handling the horse or being with the horse in the photo. And that people, person side of things is probably the bigger part. And I think that's probably the biggest misconception that people have going into this.
Yeah, and just having that insight in their mind could help them kind of avoid not going in with the right energy and expectations to those, like, initial shoots or that initial phase of their kind of exploring this type of thing.
Mhm.
I think it helps so much to go in knowing, like, okay, I have to really be on my A game for this person, bringing out the best in this person and not just, like where the angles, the light, all those other things that they're thinking
Yeah.
about. Okay, that's amazing. Tell me how you would recommend to someone getting into the industry setting their prices. You mentioned those initial shoots could be, I mean, not advertising free shoots, but
Right.
build your portfolio with your friends. Those are obviously free because
Yep.
they're for you, but from there, when you get people who are asking you to take photos of them, what is your recommendation for setting prices and then changing prices as somebody gets better?
Yeah, so there's so many different business models out there, but what I have found works for me is I base um, I base my rates around my time. And I set a low expectation. So, for instance, like one of my packages is 20 minutes and ideally 10 photos. Most of the time, I actually end up delivering like 25 photos. But I charge by that amount of time. Um, and I deliver anything that I always tell my clients I'm going to deliver anything that I feel like is on brand, is in focus, that I would be proud if you shared this on social media. Anything that fits those descriptions, I'm going to deliver to you, but you're getting this much of my time
Yeah,
for this to work out. Um, there are folks that, want to deliver well, photographers that deliver, like, social media images, and then you have to pay to get, the full resolution photos, and, like I said, lots of other business models, but for me, the time makes the most sense, and my rates have gone up as I've gotten busier, so, when I find that I have more business than I can handle, then my rates go up.
that makes
Um,
sense.
yeah, because I
Supply and
do.
demand.
Yeah, exactly. I have a 9 to 5 job, so I can only do so much. So,
Yeah,
yeah, those are the moments when I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna raise my prices," um, and so, yeah, that's just how I've done it ever since
yeah.
2016.
Cool, I love that. Very smart, very straightforward, and as a client, I think I would really appreciate that model too, especially that you are, I mean, that expectations are set, you know how much time you'll be spending with a photographer, and also just that you're, like, kind of doing your best and over delivering when you can in terms of number of images,
Yeah,
but they know kind of a minimum number that they'll get. I think that's
right.
great. Are there any, kind of similarly in the same vein, are there any must-have policies that you've kind of learned over the years really help you keep things running smoothly? I'm sure there's a million, but any that you would suggest to
Yeah,
others?
I mean, I think just oh my goodness. Um, I think communicating the expected results, beforehand is absolutely key. Um, so I try and give my clients an idea of how the session's gonna run. I'm like, I'm gonna get there 10 minutes early and take a look at the property and make a plan for where we're gonna go based on the light. We do the session. At the end of the session, I give a rough overview of how they can expect to receive their images, in what timeline, and just so that the expectations are really clear and that everyone's on the same page. I think that has been probably the biggest, like, must-have thing that I've learned to do. If the communication isn't clear, then, I think both sides can get frustrated,
Yeah,
very easily. So, I think just that and then, the other business things of taking a deposit and all of that,
yeah,
fun stuff. So, having a contract, being smart.
totally. Okay, that's great. And another there's these are kind of life lessons too. We
Yeah.
can we can call this equine photography and life lessons with
Yeah,
Britt.
exactly.
Okay, we are getting to the end of the hour, but I want to make sure that people know what your services are, know where to find you, know where in the country you are, and if you're traveling around at all, and if that travel ever includes photography, start by telling us your services and where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm based in the Triangle of North Carolina. So I'm in Durham. I'm very often in the Southern Pines area, which is another big horsey area. I can be found. I'm on Instagram all the time at Britt Gillis Design. I do travel to Aiken and Wellington occasionally. So when I'm down there, I've always have my camera with me. I like to fit in portraits if I can. So oftentimes I'll advertise on Facebook if I'm going to be traveling. But yeah, I I love being able to meet equestrians from all over the country. So my camera goes with me wherever I go.
That's amazing. And what's your website URL?
Yep, so it's, www.brittgillisdesign.com.
Makes it so easy.
It
Everything's
does.
the same. I love it. And even if you're not near Brit, go look at her work. Definitely follow her on Instagram, but look at her work because it is one of those like her portfolio will inspire you like we've talked about these other photographers and you'll see all of the brilliance behind all this amazing advice she's given us. And I hope that you get to shoot some Ride IQ members too as a result of this. That would be really fun.
Oh, yes, I absolutely love to. I have been a huge fan of Ride IQ since the get-go, and yeah, hopefully, we'll get a Bruce lesson from Holly Hudspeth on
Yes,
there
that would be
sometime soon.
amazing. Well, the fandom is definitely mutual. We are huge fans of yours too. So I'm really glad that this worked out. And I know that this will not be the last time that our paths continue to cross. I don't know what the next way it will be, but every time it happens, it's a good thing. So I'm
Yeah.
excited for that. And thank you so much again just for taking the time and teaching us all of these great things about taking beautiful pictures of our horses.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye, Brett.
Alright, bye.